today we are here to discuss Nemesis Lockdown.
Finally.
Yes, this is a Kickstarter that we've been waiting on for a long time. You got yours 2 months ago, rushed it over, sat it up on the pool table down here, and we never got to play it.
That's right.
So we're finally getting a chance to play it. Unfortunately, without Dragon Mother, she's off on an adventure outside of state.
But let's be honest, she would have found a reason not to play it.
She would have not wanted to come play it anyway.
Yeah, I don't think she would have enjoyed it very much.
I don't think she would have.
It's not her style of game. But this is very much our style of game, so we were happy. So before we get going any further, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell because you want to make sure you follow along. Rob's not the notification bell. It's probably below Rob somewhere, but he's not the notification.
Ding!
You can hit Rob if you want. It makes you feel better. It makes me feel better. But
Ding!
So let's talk about
all right. So
stats.
this is Nemesis Lockdown, which is the expansion / standalone sequel to Nemesis. This came out in 2021. Overall rank is 1432. It's rated at 8.6, so pretty good score there. Designed by Adam Kwapinski. Art by Peter Foxowicz, Jacob Diskowski, and Patrick Jadrazak. Apologies for jacking those names up. I apologize. And Iwa Labak. Published by Awaken Realms. MSRP is $159, but you're not going to find it for that because one, it's not available retail yet. But people are selling it anywhere between $319 all the way up to $1,087.
Wow!
So there's various reasons. All the Kickstarter exclusives, as well as the Sundrop version, which is their first time I've ever heard was Awaken Realms doing Sundrop minis which is a technique for painting minis. So really neat way, but so that's probably why it's so expensive.
Yeah, I'm hoping the 1,000+ one is getting all of both Nemesis and Lockdown.
Yeah, all painted.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So all right, so let's talk about the components here. We've got a lot of pretty giant minis. I mean, they're almost maxis more than minis. You've got some smaller ones too, but there's a lot of nice bits in the game. The dice are very beautiful. They're see-through. They're custom. All of the flame, all of the noise markers, everything is very pretty see-through. You've got glass beads for your status markers on your player boards. Player boards are linen finished. They're not inlaid, but they're thick quality cardboard with linen finish. The cards are not linen finish, surprisingly.
They are not.
They are smooth. They're just decent thickness, but they're very smooth.
Even though they're smooth, though, I didn't really have any problems with pulling them off the table or anything like that.
Yeah, all of the cardboard pieces are linen finish, and so is the board, which is kind of odd that they did linen finish on everything except the cards. Yeah. So
you got a decent bag for pulling tokens out of. Now, granted, this is the all-in bundle, so I would, which I believe is the same thing you got. So, if you don't go the all-in exclusive stuff, like the 3D printed doors, are cardboard in the retail version. So a lot of the stuff that we have printed would actually be cardboard versions. But this version is just, it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
And you got yours, like I said, 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Mine just showed up.
I think it was all done.
Yeah,
I think it was all done by last name. So with me being Bird and you a Wilson.
Yeah. And mine, I got a notification in January for shipping, and then it never showed up until like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
So, it was kind of frustrating waiting all that time. But, we had your copy sitting here taunting me for 2 months, so it couldn't feel too bad. And he does have these nice plate card holders that are printed in two-tone. You got the gray and then the black numbering on them.
Right. It shows you player order. So
the board is two-sided. There's actually two different layouts. You have one that is basically in ground and one that is on the surface.
Basically, you're in a base or then getting to Mars surface.
Yes. The original Nemesis was much more like a movie that we won't talk about that has aliens in it. But this one is still feels the same, but it's now set on a planet.
Right.
So maybe if it were like the third one of that series, potentially,
that will not be named.
We will not be named.
Correct.
That's right.
So, it's definitely, a different feel than the original, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. As far as quality of components, what do you think, Rob?
I mean, my opinion might be a little biased because I am a Nemesis. I mean, an Awaken Realms fanboy. I love their products, but just how beautiful the minis are, the 3D printed aspects of the doors, the quality of the other components. I can't give anything less than a 10. It's out of the park.
Yeah. What do you think, Alan?
Almost 10. I would probably give it a 9.8 or a 9.9 because I can tell the only thing that I've spotted that I found not absolutely perfect was some of the cards. The cards were during the manufacturing process are sprayed with some sort of a lacquer or something, and I could find differences in the quality. Like on this card, it's very slick over here to run over it, but I flip it over, it's just rough, which tells me that the QC was not perfect on the spraying process at the end of the printing line. But that, frankly, is the only thing that I can see that I could have call into question anything on this game. Other than that, it is about as top-notch as you can become.
What do you think, Melissa?
Well, I came into it when it was already set up, and my first thought was, this is beautiful, so I'm going to go with a 10.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think there's the cards throw it a little bit off, but it's so close. I'm going to round it up to a 10. I mean, it's very close, very minute difference. And, as Alan pointed out, it's not worth taking it down even a half point. It's so beautiful. There's so many good components to this. I think we're all unanimously close to or at a 10 on this.
Right.
So let's talk about theme. If you happen to be a fan of giant space creatures that eat people and jump out of air vents in films,
and knowing going into it that pretty good chance you're not going to win.
Yep, there's a very high chance, 100% in this game,
right,
that all of us died. And this one I would say is tougher than the original.
I agree.
But I think thematically this captures the essence of the undisclosed movie from space that has aliens in it. I think it definitely has a tension. It has the look. I mean, I would say this one, the board, I think is a little less appealing than the original. It's a very, very brown. And it's, if you like brown, that's fine. It's just,
well, I think it's about the same because the other one for the first game is just very dark.
Yeah.
So they're both very, very dark. But I think they're both kind of monotone in color. There's not a whole lot of brightness to it. But, you're not going to have, a bunch of pastel colored walls, in Mars probably.
Rainbows.
Yeah. I mean,
Some
I doubt
of the rooms
it.
are bright.
I doubt it. So,
Yeah. This one that has darkness in the sense that the power's going in and out on you.
Right.
So
That's true.
there's a lot of darkness from that. It's definitely a table hog, I will say.
Oh, for sure.
That's why it's down here on the pool table instead of upstairs, because it takes up half the pool table.
Right.
It is a big game. If you don't like a game with a ton of pieces, a lot of bits, because obviously this has a lot of bits.
The setup and takedown is pretty strenuous.
Yeah. But if you want something that's going to suck you in on theme, this game will do that.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. I've got to give it a 10 on theme as well. I mean, it definitely is the closest thing you can get to something that resembles a space horror film.
Right. I agree. I mean, just it gives you a real good sense of doom that it's going to hurt and you're not going to survive, but if you do, it's going to be really rewarding, and it feels good if you do survive. So I like that aspect of it as well. So thematically, it's a 10 for sure.
What do y'all think?
I'm also going to go with a 10. It really sucked me in. I didn't play the first one, so I have no basis for comparison with that. But I am a huge fan of the movie series that will not be named. And it definitely reminded me of that. And at some point throughout the game, it just kind of clicked that I'm not going to live. So what I'm going to do is try to save as many people as I can by completing my objectives. So.
Mm-hmm. I have nothing to disagree. I think that's absolutely right. It's fun. complex and does require you to think a little bit. It presents you with a lot of different challenges requiring on-the-fly decision making. But it gets you involved and gets you engaged and having to think it out and watch what others are doing. And first time through, it took me about a third of the way through to figure out we're not going to survive this. And probably 2/3 of the way through, you're finally starting to kind of get the hang of the mechanics and how it plays and the decision-making logic that you need to employ. So a lot of fun. I mean, I guess if I'm thinking about it, this is going to be very challenging for a lot of teens to play, especially young teens. This is almost, I would.
Yeah, I don't think this is definitely not kid friendly for sure.
This is senior high school up, in my opinion. I mean, they need somebody. There's some.
And not just the complexity too, but maybe even just the material.
Yeah,
it's pretty dark and pretty.
Right.
Yeah, it's recommended 14 and up, and I definitely think that's a strong recommendation.
Yeah, very strong. I might even kick that to 16 and up. Just not so much that a 14-year-old couldn't handle it. It just I think that there's so much complex decision making, and just the truth of the matter is the 14-year-old brain. Most of them are not yet that developed.
Yeah. Well, and I think going in, that 14-year-old may not just have fun knowing once they realize I'm going to lose, that I could say I'm never going to play this game again. And so, it takes a little bit more maturity to be able to accept that and still have fun with it. So,
I think that's why I did have fun, because I never care about winning. I just like being involved. So
now, this game's listed on the box as being 60 to 180 minutes. The only way it could be 60 minutes is if you die immediately.
Right.
Because it's going to take you a good 30 minutes just to set it up.
Yeah, for sure.
At least.
Well, and I got here at like 5 o'clock or something, and we're several hours later now.
Yeah, but it was already set up at that point.
It was set up.
Yeah, I mean, we hadn't played it in a long time, the original, and then there's obviously differences in this version from the original. And so it took us a significant amount of time to just find all the differences in the rulebook and recall what we had done with the original Nemesis.
I mean, if you're probably on your third or fourth or fifth time playing it, and you had become comfortable with all of the rules, and there's a lot to become comfortable with, that would probably speed play some, because we were continually had the rule book open, flipping. What is this?
Right,
what is this?
Because there are multiple
How
ways.
How does this deck work? And you just have to learn all that stuff. I think once you've got all that learned, 60 to 180, closer to 180.
Yeah, I think 180
probably is reasonable. 60 to 180 first time out of the box ain't gonna happen.
Yeah,
right.
There were multiple ways that the intruders attack depending on when they're attacking or where they're attacking, and so that was a lot of referencing.
So, moving on, the rule book. So the rule book is 32 pages long, and then there's a couple reference sheets. We actually didn't end up using the reference sheet.
And it's small print.
Yeah, very small print. Big book, about the same size as the game. And it is very small print, all printed on black with white lettering, and some other color, but mostly white. There are some good pictures in there. They're lettered and numbered to reference the different sections for setup and such, which is nice. But there's a lot of referencing back and checking, because we were getting through and having to go back to the setup to make sure that things were set up, because there were some unexpected things as we encountered it during the game. Right. It was like, wait a minute, because this is one of the in conditions. Is the piece really not in the game? And sure enough, it wasn't. But yeah, there's a lot of things that we remember from Nemesis always being there and took for granted that were not in this book the same way. So it wasn't so much that there was a lack of things or things were missing from the book as, one, you had to find them and sift through 32 pages to find it and figure out exactly where it was. Now, there were a lot of references to the credit of the book. So when you go in, it would tell you, see page, whatever, but you're doing a whole lot of, okay, I'm looking here, and then I'm flipping to page 20, and then I'm flipping to page 22, and it's kind of following the chain to flow through what you're trying to find. So there was a lot of manipulation in the rulebook. We didn't end up using the auxiliary sheets at all, because we just kept using and relying on the rulebook so much. So to the credit of the rulebook, we were able to chase everything down pretty much. I think there was a couple things that we didn't bother to look up that we just assumed and went forward because it was just too much. Given the fact that the font is tiny in the book, it's really, if you've got bad eyes like me, it was a strain to try to see it and find it. They are labeled clearly, but it is a lot of flipping in the book.
We had a hard time finding stuff.
Some of the stuff we did have a hard time finding. I don't think it was in a really horribly in a bad spot. It was generally in those areas, but you just had to keep sifting through 32 pages to find where it was.
I think actually the only real complaint I heard from you is that it seemed like some of the terminology that they used from the original Nemesis they used in this rule book interchangeably.
Yeah.
So, like the difference between
the Night Stalkers,
the Night Stalkers versus the Intruders.
Yeah, because there's two event decks in the game, a Night Stalker deck and an Intruder deck. And we couldn't find any reference to where the Intruder event deck was supposed to be used. It's in the setup, but then there was a Night Stalker event deck, and that's the one that looked like it was supposed to be used. So we ended up just making a judgment call on that and moving forward because it looked like the same cards were in both.
Yeah, without really looking into it. But we did find like one specific card that was in both decks.
Yeah. So we just went ahead and played with the Night Stalker event deck, as it looked like that was the one that was relevant, and that's what the creatures were called.
Yeah.
But then there was places where everything kept referencing the Intruders all throughout the book, too. So, there was some confusion on that. I'm not 100% sure we got some of that right, but we were close, I think, to the point where it wasn't affecting the gameplay.
Yeah. I mean, we may have made it harder on us, and I don't know, but...
Yeah. So, all in all, I'm probably going to give this rulebook probably a 7. I don't think it's horrible. I think it's laid out well. I just think there's a lot of material, and it's a heavy game. And, if you play this game regularly, I think it'll become second nature to you. But just trying to play it once in a while is going to be a problem. You're going to have to sift through this a lot.
And I read it originally. I did the setup originally, and I don't remember having a hard time setting it up. I know it took me about an hour to do it because you guys were playing something else.
Well, I learned to play a game. I was learning a game. I was punching the game. I read the rules. And it wasn't like a basic game. It was a moderate level game. And we had it all set up by the time you finished
setting this up.
So,
but that was 2 months ago. Yeah. So I didn't remember a thing about it by the time we came back to it.
Yeah.
And so Randy, we basically learned afresh with Randy teaching.
Yeah. Now, we had the benefit of knowing we've played Nemesis
a few times. That helped.
Yeah.
That helped.
Yeah. Well, it helped and it hurt because there were things in it that they had changed that really...
some of those assumptions may have hurt us.
Yeah. So, let's move on to talking about the gameplay. So, if you're familiar with Nemesis, we'll kind of point out some of the differences. If you're not familiar, we'll give you a slight overview. It's just way too much to give you the whole gameplay. But you're going to start out with a hand of 5 cards, and you got to choose your character, and each character has their own personalized deck. So you get a bunch of actions that are for your character specifically. Now, there is a lot of overlap of functionality, but each one's going to be slightly different.
And there's some asynchronous to the character themselves, like what your starting weapon is and stuff like that.
Yeah. And in this case, there's also various knowledge, because... If some of the characters were survivors from first Nemesis that they brought back, and some were new characters. So they actually gave the characters that came from the last game some extra knowledge, which I thought that was clever.
Yeah, I think so too.
And they also let you start out with one of the facts about the creatures that was a weakness up front. Now, granted, the one we got didn't really impact much in the game for them, but we did have a weakness that was known from the beginning. But you can actually gain knowledge by taking different actions on the board in this game, which I thought was pretty cool. Which that's a different variant from the old one. But each one, there's 2 different starting locations, one for the players who have been in the previous game and one for the people that are newcomers. And then from there, you take actions, and the basic actions are on your player board. You can pay 1 card. You always have to discard a card to take an action. It may be more than 1 card. So you have to discard a card to move, and if you then have to discard cards to have combat, where you shoot if you have a weapon, or you melee attack. If you melee attack, it's basically the same as shooting, except you automatically take a contamination because you're up close and personal with these contagious creatures. If you shoot, you have ammo you got to deal with, and your weapon runs out. Now you're not able to use your weapon anymore until you get new ammo. You can pick up, when you're not in combat, you can use an action to pick up objects. So there might be carcasses or eggs or whatever to pick up and carry with you to examine, that will give you further knowledge and increase your knowledge of the weaknesses of the creatures. You can also craft items. If you gather items along the way, some of them will have different icons on them that you can combine items, and if you get to the right room, you actually can build more powerful items.
Like a flamethrower.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I had 2 items that I could have combined to build a taser, but it was a one-time use. I was like, it's kind of frustrating to go through all that effort to build something, and then it's a one-time use.
Especially since you were on the opposite end of the game board at that point in time, too.
And that was our big frustration during the gameplay, was where things were located. And this one, Nemesis, it seemed like a lot of the rooms were connected. Not everything, but you had a lot more mobility.
You can move around much easier in the first game than you could in this game.
This one is very slow.
Yeah.
It would take several turns just to get from one end to the other.
Well, I think the movement was about the same. You still, but
it's just stuff wasn't as
you didn't have things as disjointed. You didn't have.
This is almost a straight line path from beginning to end, whereas Nemesis, you got branching paths off the same room.
Yeah,
so there was multiple ways to get to each room.
There's series. I mean, you have rows going across, but
it's almost a snake-like path.
It's almost like a ladder or a DNA strand or something. But you're moving.
It's much slower.
There's 3 different sections of the board, and they're connected via elevator or ladder. The elevator was a joke because it was broken down from the very beginning of the game, and we never got power to it, so it was pretty much dead to us. But the movement was definitely a pain in this game. And the other thing was that in original Nemesis, there were 3 escape pods. They were active after a certain amount of time in the game. They became active, and you had to get to a certain room that you've discovered that was the entrance for all 3 of them, and you could escape in them, and you didn't have to run the risk of them going away. This one, the first one is always there in the game, but the other 2 are actually optional rooms.
Well, it's random.
Yeah.
You may have them, you may not.
And we didn't have either of them.
Yeah. All we had was A.
We didn't have B escape pod. Now they do have to alleviate that. They have a onboard location where you can basically go into a secure room that nobody can get into. But then you're reliant on the ship, or not the ship, but the planet base not blowing up.
Right.
Or they have a Mars bunker that you can escape from the base completely and go to safety in another building. And then you could care less whether the building base blows up or not.
Assuming you can get to it at a time.
Yeah. Now, you also have a personal objective. You get 2 dealt to you at the beginning of the game. You get to choose which one you want to play and which one you keep, and that choice gets to be made after the first creature comes onto the board. So you have a little bit of time, albeit not much, because it doesn't take much to get creatures onto the board. Right. We were very efficient at getting creatures on the board.
Efficient.
Oh yeah, we were great.
Got the most powerful one right out the
Yep, we got the mama right off the bat. But it's once the first creature spawns, you have to lock in on which approach you're going to take. Now, those things may be altruistic, where you're trying to do things that are beneficial to the future of society.
I think those are more rare.
Yeah, or you can have ones where you're trying to kill other players. Or you can have one where you coincidentally draw the one that says you have to make sure that your character is dead, which obviously can't happen, or you lose. They always have an alternative that everyone else dies except for you. And that's what I had, was that card.
And I had something very similar to that.
So we needed to make sure that whatever scenario you got out of the bad situation and the others didn't. So you can actually escape before completing your objective in the case of like people dying and hope for the best, which is what I tried to do, which didn't work out at all.
All right.
The other thing that was added, which I liked in theory, was everybody gets a knowledge token that basically tells you a scenario that could not be true that's going to happen, because they have like one scenario that's at the end of the track where it's going to ultimately be the corporation who owns this base is going to basically eliminate certain aspects of the players from the game. So it may be that the people that have not raised their knowledge above the level 4 are all going to die. Or they may destroy all the escape pods. Or they may destroy the people that are in the isolation chamber. Or the bunker.
Or whatever.
Whatever. There's different scenarios where one of them is going to be the true one that's in the game. But everybody gets one token that cannot be that scenario. So it's kind of like Clue.
Yeah.
You get a little bit of information, but you don't really have ways of sharing it outright. You can lie about it.
And you don't want to. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't want to share.
Yeah, because it's not really a cooperative game. It's semi-co-op because you kind of all have to survive, long enough to complete your objectives. But you're not really caring about the other people living so much, or you actually absolutely don't want them to.
Yeah, it's very brutal.
Yeah. So, as far as those are the big differences I saw in the game. I think the one that really impacted us were the fact that you can have some of the escape pods not even be in the game. That really hurt us a lot. We scoured. We searched every room in the.
Well, Melissa opened up most of it.
Yeah.
So
I'm
she
the MVP.
You're the discovery MVP. Alan was the best at creating doors.
Yes, that was really good.
I don't know how many turns there in a row he dropped the door behind.
Creatures too.
Yeah, you drop doors, and then you somehow always drop doors and had the noise be behind the door, which made sense.
I didn't care about the doors. He just kept dropping enemies where I needed to go. So it's like I just really slowed me down.
And he broke every
summon
computer.
Enemies. It's blindingly easy to summon them.
Yeah, and he broke every computer he touched too.
Yeah, that too.
So we ended up dying because there's a certain number of malfunction tokens, and if all of them are on the board, you lose the game. And we ran out of malfunction tokens after 3 of us were already out of the game.
And I was just trying to save everybody, and then kaboom.
Yep.
And we appreciate that.
Yeah.
But
Would appreciate it more if you actually removed the malfunction tokens.
That was my very next step, but we blew up first.
So, you can have all kinds of tragedies. You can have fires spread all throughout. You can have malfunction tokens. When you flip a room, you have no idea what you're running into in that room. It could be something that's helpful, but generally it's going to be something bad. And you never know. I mean, the room itself is always pretty much a good room. Although there is one contaminated room for whatever reason that you ran into right away.
That was the first room, wasn't it?
That was fun. I was slimed the entire game.
Yeah.
Because by the time we found the room that helped you get rid of the slime, power kept going out.
Yeah.
And so then it couldn't do me any good. And
weren't there
and then
intruders in that room?
He kept plopping intruders all over the place. I couldn't get in there. And
yeah. So, it was definitely a brutal game. And, I thought, several times people were individually going to die. I mean, you had 3 serious wounds, and if you got one more hit, you would have died and been out of the game.
But then, fortunately, I had, a med kit or something and was able to...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, Alan, you were close to dying several times. Yeah. And, that's one thing I don't like about this game. Player elimination is a big aspect of the game. You can end up knocked out of the game early on, and you're just out. You're you're going to sit for potentially 2 hours watching the game, and that's never fun. But it's kind of important to the game, so I don't know how you would remove that or alleviate it. They have some games like that where you spawn back on the enemy side and all that, but I just don't see that working in this game.
And if I was going to critique it, there's a lot of luck in the combat.
Mm-hmm.
So just if there was some ways to mitigate that would have been a little bit nicer. Mm-hmm. But again, if that's the case, it would take away that tension. It would take away that brutality of the game, and it probably wouldn't be as fun otherwise.
Yeah, and I will say that in Nemesis and in this version, I find that characters that have a rifle have a distinct advantage compared to people that just have a pistol, or in your case, you didn't even have a weapon, did you?
I just got to slap them.
I had a great gun, but again, I don't roll well, so it did me a whole lot of good. It didn't do me a whole lot of good.
Well, I
I at least had good rolls.
Yeah.
This is the first game where I actually played with a character that had a rifle. I always used to have ones that had pistols.
Yeah.
And there's a night and day difference. And when I was in battle with the creatures this game, I always killed them within 2 hits. I mean, it was 2 rolls. I mean, it was not, I never ran into a situation where I had to, to run or, be in a situation. Whereas, you, on the other hand, you either got contaminated because you had a ton of contamination cards at the end.
Which, I think at least half my deck was contamination cards.
And in Nemesis, if you haven't played it at all, you get these contamination cards, and they have the little cryptic red thing that you have to use a scan, basically a decoder to push in. And
so you slide that in there, and then you'll be able to read whether or not you've been infected with it.
And some games it's hard to you can basically just tell by looking at it, and so you have to avoid trying to look closely because you'll be able to read it. They actually do a pretty good job masking it.
Yeah, I actually tried to read it without the decoder just to see if I could, and I could not.
Yeah, because they put like letters randomly that actually look like the word infected, but they're not. So it's not as easy to tell. So they actually do a pretty good job masking it. But you get one of those in certain scenarios from events, or you get them from having to attack or being attacked.
And they just fill up your deck, and then you're going to draw them, and you can't use them for anything.
Yeah, you can't discard them until you pass, and then you can discard them from your hand, but you can't use them for any kind of actions.
Right.
So, and the other thing in this game is it's when you pass, you got to be careful, because if you burned all your cards, you run a higher risk of getting attacked.
Yeah.
So it's almost sometimes you want to pass while you still have some of your actions left to you.
Yeah, but some of them were even expensive, you literally have to pass and not spend a card at all to be able to have the 5 that you needed to be able to avoid getting a surprise attack during the next round.
Yeah.
How likely is that going to happen?
Yeah.
Never. So.
And you and I were slimed early on, which gives you it makes it tougher. More risk of noise being happened, because there's one of the die rolls that you can do when every time you move, you have to roll to see if you make noise and where it's going to fall. And one of them is supposed to be basically silence. You manage to do it successfully, but when you get slimed, silence is now
the worst
thing can happen, because it becomes every corridor around you gets a noise token. And if you get 2 in the same corridor, you just spawn the creature in your room with you.
Here comes Batty.
So it is a brutal game. That said, I have a lot of fun playing it. I go in expecting I'm going to die and hope for the best.
Yeah.
And, this game, I didn't feel like I ever had a chance. That's the one thing I preferred. I think the old one was hard enough. This felt harder. So I can't say I enjoyed this as much as Nemesis. I mean, I like it. I just don't like it as much as the original.
I think I liked it as much because I don't think we've ever won regular Nemesis either. I mean, I think I agree. I think this is harder, but it's pretty dang hard too. So the original is pretty tough. So you just got to go in knowing that. And I think that you go in with that expectation. This is a great, fun game. If you go in there or you're strategizing, knowing you're doing everything you can to win the game, you're going to be sorely disappointed because you're probably not going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing just for the experience, I think you're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
If you're going in thinking I got a shot and a chance at all, a snowball's chance in space of surviving, you're not going to have that likelihood in this game. It is very tough. I mean, you might freak chance win, but they
that's going to be rare.
It seems like they've upped the difficulty level of this version a lot.
And this is the vanilla version. There's variants, and there's different. The one board that we got with the Nest, that's one of 3 different 4, I think, different ways of playing just this version of the game. And so each one is different. And then we got the other side of the map, and that's completely different. So there's a lot more variety to this version than the original Nemesis, which is really nice. I like that a lot. Plus, you got Nemesis, and plus you got all this other stuff that with the stretch goals where you can get new characters in there, and they got these little mini. We didn't play with any of the mini variant, but we played with the. Well, we didn't play with it, but that one mini variant where it could have got the feats. We didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of stuff we haven't even scratched yet.
So, giving it a score.
Overall game.
What
do you think?
So I actually would give it probably an 8.5. I liked it a lot. Like I said, having not played the first one,
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing really to compare it to. And it took me about halfway through the game before I realized there is no surviving this. But I had the adrenaline go in there for a while.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
it really, really sucked me into the game. So
The 8.5, I agree with. The movement, it can seem a little draggy
Mm-hmm.
once you get into the game, because it just takes so much just to move from room to room that it can feel a little bit draggy. But again, part of that, you're observing what the other players are doing, which is a learning event, because you're seeing as they figure out the rules, that helps you. So 8.5 is fair.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle on this one because when I'm playing, I was trying to figure out how to complete my objectives. And given the fact that I had to make sure the ship basically base blew up or you guys died from various causes anyway, the easiest way would have been to detonate the base. Basically, when you detonate the base, it sets the timer for 3 rounds ahead of you. That gives you 3 rounds to get out of the ship. And the distance from where everything was this game, from the only way to get off the base, because there weren't any escape pods. We had one escape pod. Oh, and that's the other thing. Over time, the escape pods jettisoned.
Yeah.
And ours jettisoned early, where we lost.
We only had
all
one, and then the one that made it go said that even if we had all 3, they would all launch at the same time.
Yeah.
So that was not an option in this game.
Yeah, and it also made it more difficult because when you get in the pod, if it doesn't launch, you take a serious wound.
Yeah.
So you could actually die just sitting in this pod waiting to launch. So it's brutal in that sense. But yeah, I mean, I would have to detonate it, and it would have taken longer. Just the movement to get back to where I could get out of the base I would have died. The base would have blown up before I could ever reach there.
yeah.
So I felt like there was absolutely no chance I had of surviving. And that got frustrating because it was like, the only thing I could do is lock myself in the isolation chamber and hope that everybody else had an alien infection and died, or else died in the process.
Well, you knew I was going to. I mean, I had all the
Yeah, I figured you were almost guaranteed. It was a matter of whether Rob was going to do it, and he got to the chamber. I was kind of hoping he'd get killed by the creatures, but I didn't think it was likely.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, I mean, once that happened, it was kind of like this felt basically like pointless. I mean,
a little anticlimactic.
Yeah, I mean, and I didn't feel that ever in the original Nemesis. I mean, that one always struck me as, even the time like I managed to get off the ship and I was waiting for everybody to see what happened, and they, I had to make sure you guys all died and I survived, and it worked because you guys all died and I was in the escape pod. And unfortunately, I flipped and I was I had one infected card and I was infected.
Yeah, so it could still be anticlimactic, even the original too. But I think that I agree with Alan. I think I'd go a little bit higher. I think I'd give it a 9, but I'm not going to give it a 10 just because the length is so long, and then being able to know that you go 2-3 hours into it and then realize you're not going to win the game.
That's why
I like it, but it's still a bummer, and it's like, man, that kind of stinks.
Yeah.
I could have played something else and would have won. Maybe.
Exactly.
So,
That's what I'm going to go ahead and give it a 7.5. I don't think it's quite as good as the original Nemesis because of that. I mean, Nemesis had its times where you could fail, but it was an epic fail. You felt like, it was, you either died in the process of getting eaten, or you got to the end, thought you had a chance at winning, and you still lost. And that didn't bother me so much. It was actually something laughable and we could talk about after. This one, it just felt like after a while, it was like, there's just no hope, but I still have to get off the ship and do something, or else throw myself into the creature's
But see, that's sometimes how I feel about Battlestar. I feel the same way sometimes, where you just get to a certain point and like, there's nothing I can do. I mean, I'm not going to be able to win this game at all. Impossible. And so, and that was one of my criteria for Battlestar. And I think that's the same thing for here. You get to a certain point and just know that you can't do it. It's like,
yeah, but you trashed my Battlestar, whereas this one.
Yeah, but this is different. Well, it's just that, that sense of doom that you get, I get the same from like games like Battlestar. And so it's like, you just don't know. You realize you're not going to win it. And so it just makes it kind of, that's a bummer. And so that's why I can't give it as high of a score as I would like. But
See, that's where it's a little bit different for me because of my objectives. So even though I knew I wasn't going to live, my objectives were, to do something to try to save everybody else. And you all were in the isolation room. So theoretically, I could have saved you. So even though I was going to die, I still could have saved someone,
Right.
So...
Yeah, mine wasn't as lofty of a goal.
Yeah.
I just had to make sure you guys died. And so that wasn't an option for me. And,
well, I actually had the choice. I have one that was to get something scanned or something, and then if I managed to pull that off, and then I had to make sure that there was another. Like I think sectors 1 and 2 had to be fully searched. And I'm like, well, that one doesn't sound nearly as fun as making sure everybody's dead. So I'm going to go with the attack one.
Way to go, Randy.
Uh-huh.
I didn't really, both of them had to kill everybody off, but one was I had to kill everybody off and survive. One I had to kill everybody off and send the signal. And so either way, people had died.
Yeah.
So.
And that's the other thing. You can't really attack people directly.
Right.
Yeah, you have to indirectly do it by putting obstacles in their path. And
that part I do like.
Yeah, I like that.
I like that part, being able, because like there was one part where I put all the doors up. I almost like, I could put that up around people.
Oh yeah.
But then it clearly be all right that we know what Robert wants to do, and then now I'd have a big target on my back.
Well, see,
so when is a good time to do that?
I had stockpiled thermite grenades where I could be in an adjacent room and toss them into the room to fight the creature.
I got one of those right at the end.
Set the room on fire and malfunction it.
Right. If it took someone else out, I'm sorry.
And it does one damage to everything in the room, including people. Yeah. So I was like, I can't directly attack him, but I'm kind of helping. I'm trying to fight those creatures. So, so I think all in all, it's positive scores. It's just, range of opinion based upon the brutality of this game and, the feeling of that there's just absolutely nothing you can do, I think is the big impact.
I'm hoping that when I get some time, whenever that might be, which may be never, but I really hope I get the chance to try this out solo and see what it feels like in a solo experience too. It may feel completely different, and so I'm hoping that might be truly be different in a good way. So
yeah. So given the fact that you have played Nemesis versus this one, do you think this one is better than Nemesis or on par? Or?
I think it's on par for different reasons. Because I like the Mars theme better. I like that idea. Don't get me wrong. I love the movie that shall not be named in this, that this is comparable to. Love it a lot. But I do like the Mars theme of this a little bit more because it's different. It's not the same. It's not as comparable to something that is that's so big in the media. Mm-hmm. So I like that part. And then I like the minis. I think the minis look really good on this one compared to the other one, just because they are so vastly different. So I think it's comparable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know why we didn't just drop a terraforming bomb on here and terraform Mars.
Oh, we totally should have.
Yeah. We could have also played that in less time than this, I think.
A couple times, probably. Yeah.
All right, well, that's our thoughts on Nemesis Lockdown. So hopefully you enjoyed it and can join us again. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Don't hit it again if you have, because we don't want to lose you.
Right.
All right, so until next time, bye.
Bye.